So you're thinking about buying a house, but you don't want to start too early, you don't want to start too late. You just really want to know, what is the timeline? How long can I expect it to take from start to finish of buying a house? This video is your answer. Stick around. How's it going, y'all? My name is Jesse Lynch. This channel is devoted to all things buying, selling, investing in real estate, specifically in Minnesota, because that's where I'm from and that's what I know. I'm gonna do my absolute best to put out at least 2 videos a week. So please do me a favor and do yourself a favor. If you're at all interested in down the line in buying, selling, or investing in real estate in Minnesota, subscribe. And if you're feeling real crazy, click the bell, like the channel, like this video. Do me a favor, I'd really appreciate it. The more subscribers, likes, comments I get, the more people can see this stuff. And ultimately, the more people I can help achieve their goals in real estate. So let's get started, shall we? This video, basically, I just want to talk about the timeline of what it takes to buy a house. And you probably don't want to hear this, but the truth is that it varies and depends on a lot of things. Primarily on when you are hoping to move, if you have a lease in place or whatever, but it really depends on your finances, like your credit score, your income, what kind of your job situation is. If you just started a job, like 5 days ago and you're watching this video, well, unfortunately, to buy a house in the traditional route with a mortgage, it's going to take you a while. Like, it could take you 2 years. But don't stop this. There are certain things you can do. There are certain programs that you can use. If you make good money and have good credit, just don't want to be paying rent in the traditional way. There are certain things you can do. And if you are in that situation, hit me up and very specifically say, hey, I'm in that situation you talked about where I just got a job, it pays really well. I want to become an owner of a house. I don't want to just rent another house. How do I do it? I will say it's not the most ideal situation for everybody, but it's out there and I want you to know that. So if you didn't just get a job and maybe you've watched some of my other videos about how do I get a mortgage, how much does it cost to buy a house, and you've watched all that stuff and you're like, okay, cool, this looks all very doable, and now you're watching this video just wondering truly, when should I reach out to me, hopefully, or whatever, somebody else that you know in real estate. But if it's in Minnesota and you're looking for a house, I would be so happy to be the person. Shameless plug over. Let's just kind of get into really the picture. What does it really look like for most people to get into a house? And maybe how I'm going to do this is talk about the fastest length of time possible for somebody, start to finish, kind of what's like the fastest it can be. And then you can kind of work backwards from that. And sorry, one thing before I start everything that I really want to say is that there really isn't too early a time to reach out to somebody like me, okay? If you know, like, hey, I just got a job 5 days ago, pays really good, I love it, I'm gonna keep it for 2 years, cool. Then reach out to me and say, hey, in 2 years I wanna buy a house. That's cool, I'll take note of that, and I will do my absolute best to keep track of it, keep you on point, keep in touch. That time is gonna go by way faster than you know it, and then I'm gonna be able to reach out to you, and I'll say, hey, how's your plan to buy a house looking? So let's just dive into it. I'm gonna start basically just at the beginning, and I'll work my way that way. So I'm not really gonna count you looking on Zillow for the first however long before you get in touch with me, because you could window shop on Zillow for 40 years, you know, assuming Zillow exists that long. But I'm just gonna start with when you get a hold of me to when you can close on a house, basically, when you become a home owner. So when you get a hold of me, whether that's call, text, email, submitting a form on my website, DM on Instagram, DM on Facebook, kinda whatever, when you reach out to me, basically my goal will be to get back to you right away. If I can get back to you that same day, cool. If you call and I answer, cool. I do my best to answer the phone. I didn't used to, but now I have to answer all those stupid car warranty spam phone calls because I always kind of think that it might be one of you calling me and I just don't have the number. But they trick me over and over again. But nonetheless, I answered my phone. So if you call, I'll probably answer the phone. If I don't, leave a message. I'll get back to you, text me, whatever. It's 2020. We can probably figure out how to get a hold of each other. I bet we can. Cool. So depending on how you reach out to me, whether that be a phone call, whether that be a text, we're going to set up a time to have a lengthier chat. And basically, depending on your comfort level, that conversation will take maybe 30 minutes to an hour and a half. And that kind of depends on where you're at. And really, it depends on if you want to have a call with me and a lender. Maybe you've already watched a bunch of my videos and you know, like, hey, according to all this stuff, I should be pretty ready to go. So I'd love to meet with your lender and see where we're at. And that's cool. Eventually, you have to meet with a lender anyways. You can't buy a house without having some sort of pre-approval letter from a lender, unless you have a ton of cash, but then you still need proof of funds. Okay, and in that first conversation, basically we're going to talk about sort of your goals, right? Like what's your timeline, whatever. And if you're meeting with a lender, then they're going to ask you some questions about your income, they're going to run your credit, and they're going to get a more full picture of, okay, here's probably what you can afford. And it's so cool that that can actually just take an hour to sit down with a lender and already be able to know that, yes, according to what you told us, you will be able to be pre-approved for a house. Here's how much it'll be. And based on the money that you have for down payment and the sort of monthly payment that you want to be making, here's what you should stick to as far as your budget goes. And if that goes well, right, if you're given the pre-approval, then everything else can happen kind of shockingly fast. Quick story time. I'm not kidding. I just closed on a house for a friend. She hit me up at the end of April, like the last couple days of April. And she said, hey, I just watched one of your videos and I think maybe home ownership might actually be more of a reality for me than I thought it was. And so we met with a lender, and on June 15th, like less than 50 days later, she closed on a house and she was the owner of a house. She was very stoked. I was very stoked. It was super cool to see that. And that is kind of one of the most ideal situations, but it happens. Actually, I would say truly probably more ideal would be you have $500,000 cash and you're ready to just pull the trigger on something and you say, hey, I can close on your house in 15 days. And you'd have to get a title company that can do that fast, which is possible. But if you have a bunch of cash, you can do stuff really, really fast. But most people don't. And most people who are watching a YouTube video about the timeline of buying a house probably very specifically don't have that much cash. If you do, good for you. How'd you get it? I'm a little bit suspicious of that. Just kidding. So once you first reach out to me and then we schedule that meeting with the lender, that might take as much as a week. It depends on everybody's schedule, right? If you're pretty busy, it could take that long. If you're not that busy, if you're pretty flexible, it certainly doesn't have to be that long. I can usually make them happen pretty quickly. My lenders are really busy as well, but they're really good about scheduling. And so within the first week after you reach out to me, as long as you're good about scheduling, then by the end of the first week, you should be at pre-approval. Okay, so that's really a huge step. And so once you're at that point, and usually in that first meeting, I like to set up an email search where basically you tell me what you want in a house, what you want in a neighborhood, and we go through and we map it out basically. Hey, I want to go this area, this area, this area, and I want a 2-bedroom house. I want at least 2 bathrooms. I want at least 1,000 square feet, whatever that happens to be, 5,000 square feet, whatever you want to do. But in that consultation and pre-approval day, I like to set that up as well. And then now that you understand how much you can afford, then you can also wrap your head around, okay, what kind of a house does that afford me? And so, if you haven't been window shopping on Zillow, which by the way, don't trust Zillow, but whatever, it's kind of useful. But then basically over the next, couple days, or if it's a weekend or whatever, you can look at everything that's coming up and you can start to sort of favorite things or send me things and say, hey, I like this one or I don't like this one for this reason. And we can begin to start to narrow our search, maybe literally within the search or maybe mentally, right? Maybe you decide, oh, you know what? I don't like hardwood floors. I only want carpet and linoleum. Or maybe you're strictly like, I hate carpet, I only want that. Or maybe you're like, if this house doesn't have a dishwasher, then it's not for me. I get it. And then we can just begin to only pay attention to the ones that suit you. Maybe you only want a 1 level, or maybe you specifically want a 2-story, whatever it is, we can begin to understand this is the kind of house that you're interested in. And also literally right after you get a pre-approval, we can go look at houses. So if at 9 a.m. we have a meeting and you get a pre-approval, say you're good for up to $300,000, and then you get this search and you start to look at it, and literally that day you say, hey, I really like this house. We can go look at it that day. It really can happen that fast. It's crazy. But that being said, it doesn't always happen that fast. If you have a very specific criteria or you want big house and you have not that much budget, there's only going to be so many things that come on that fit that criteria, right? So if you're fairly flexible with what kind of house you want, there's a higher likelihood that you're going to be interested in some of the houses that you see right away. And I'm all for it. Let's go look at them. Even if upon going there, you decide, oh, I don't really like this house. You know what? It's education. I think it's all really valuable. For you to be able to walk into 4 different houses and say they all cost $250,000, and you can see sort of the varying quality and like what gets you what. Maybe I could afford a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom at $250,000. But it was built in the 40s and it hasn't been updated since the 90s. Or maybe I could get a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, or a 3-bedroom, 1-bath for the same price, and it's updated, it's modern, it has central air conditioning, that kind of stuff. And for you to be able to go, okay, this kind of money can afford, first of all, when you look at more stuff like that, you start to get an eye for, this is a good deal. And honestly, I've looked at so many houses that I can look at a house and say, this is underpriced, this will go higher than what it's listed at. And sometimes I might be able to look at a house and say, this is overpriced. This is going to sit at this price for as long as it's on the market until they drop the price. So yeah, maybe it's a great house, but do not buy it at that. And in fact, the bank probably wouldn't even let you buy it at that because they would appraise it and they would determine that in fact it is not worth that much money. That is all to say that this process, the actual house hunt process, can take a huge variety of time. My friend that I was telling you about down towards Rochester, she literally, the first house that we looked at is the house she ended up buying. We did end up looking at another house that day. It was not very nice. And really, she just fell in love with the first house. And it was a great house. Now she's the owner of it. And one thing she said that I think is kind of interesting is that after she had the accepted offer, she kept looking at all the houses that were emailed to her just to see, like, did I make a mistake? Did I jump the gun too much? Should I not have bought this one? And she said, no. The truth is, every house she looked at after that, in the emails, she did not like as much as that first one. And so she was thrilled that she ended up pulling the trigger on that first one, and now she owns it. And that is just to say that that can happen, and it's crazy. And so just sort of be prepared for that, right? Be prepared to find a house that you like in the first week. There's no guarantee that that's going to happen, but it's entirely possible. If you know you're picky, if you know you have a very specific taste, then I would say don't assume you're going to find it in the first week. And also, don't feel bad for me that we have to go look at houses. I love looking at houses, whether they're trashed or beautiful. I love looking at trashed houses because I renovate houses, and I love to see that process. I love to sort of flex my creative muscles and look at a dump and try to see, what I would do to it. And likewise, I like to see a beautiful house because I love the finished product. So I'm going to sort of try to average out approximately how long it takes for most people to find a house. And I'm going to say a month is how long the hunt could take. And obviously, again, that could be a single day of looking. That could be 2 months, 5 months, 6 months, a year. It depends on you. It depends on how actively you're looking. It depends on how picky you are. And another thing to consider is that just because you find a house that you love on the first day doesn't necessarily mean that you get that house, okay? The market that we are currently in is quite hot. Okay, houses fly off the market, especially in sort of the $200,000 to $350,000 range. Those houses, which are sort of like the average house in the Twin Cities, they fly, they're gone. And that's not to discourage you. I've had a lot of luck helping people get into houses in that range. That's basically everybody that I work with. And I've had a lot of luck getting people into those houses. So just keep that in mind. And again, if we're working together, I'm going to tell you that. I'm going to kind of remind you, like, hey, just because you find a house you love, do not fall in love with a house too much because you might not get it. Somebody else might be able to offer $50,000 more than you and be able to cover the extra in cash. You don't know. You only know what you have to work with. And so that's what you go off of, and you do your best with what you have. And trust me, we'll make it happen, okay? I don't care if it goes on the market at 2 p.m. and I have to go look at it alone at 3, and then you get to see it again at 5. I'm going to do my best to make it happen. And so far, I have not failed. Okay, so back into this. You find the house and you put an offer in and it gets accepted. That little span of time from when you put the offer in to when it gets accepted, it could be a couple hours, it could be a day, it could be the next day, it could be, if it's a hot weekend, it could be Monday. If you see it on Friday and put an offer in and they know they have a ton of showings, they might wait to review it until Sunday night or Monday morning or something like that. And basically that's only going to take like a couple days. So I'm not even going to count that. That'll be part of the hunt. And then offer accepted is the end of that hunt. And then once the offer is accepted, if you've watched some of my other videos about how to buy a house, you know that sort of the next phase is inspection, okay? And typically, this isn't across the board, you're gonna see a 10-day inspection phase, which basically means that in the first 10 days, you have to hire an independent inspector. Or maybe if you know like a home builder or something, you could always leverage a relationship like that where they can go in and tell you how everything's built. But truly, they have systems and checklists in place, and so they might know to check things that a home builder might not even know. So you get through the inspection phase, and that's 10 days. And then basically from there, you're dealing with appraisal. An appraisal typically is going to take 3 to 4 weeks from the accepted offer to when the appraisal happens. I think they can happen a little sooner, but typically you're looking at a 3-week wait time. A lot of that has to do with the lender. They have to get certain things in order based on this house before they can even order the appraisal. But 3 to 4 weeks for the appraisal. And basically after that, you're going to be dealing with underwriting. And underwriting doesn't take super long, but know that it's there. Know that you can't close basically the day after an appraisal. You're going to need a little bit of time after the appraisal for underwriting to finish all their stuff. And then they're going to give you a closing disclosure. Basically, they're going to say, hey, here's how much money you have to bring to the closing table. Here's what your monthly payments look like. Here's where all the money's going. This is where your loan is from. And it's going to the seller. And the seller owes some money for taxes. And maybe they owe some money for assessments. And so that's going into an escrow account. And that escrow account will ultimately pay it all out. It's a lot of stuff. You don't really have to know that going into it. Hopefully that should be explained to you pretty well at the time. So truthfully, I can kind of clump that whole thing, that whole from offer accepted to closing date. I can just kind of clump that in to one thing, which basically it's limited by the lender and the speed of the lender. And most lenders are going to need a minimum of a month to close, a minimum. More is ideal, but hey, if you can make an offer sweeter for the seller by saying 30 days to close and you're going against other offers that want 60, then I say go for it. I say as long as you can pull it off, as long as you're comfortable with it, do whatever suits the seller because they might forfeit $5,000, $10,000 because they can close quicker. So use that to your advantage. If you work with me, I know that. I'll tell you that anyways. Basically, you're looking at 1 month from closing date back to the accepted offer, minimum. I would say probably the longest you're going to do is 2 months, okay? So plan for that. Anything longer than that, it's not going to be that good of an offer. A lot of sellers might be annoyed that you need 2 months to close because that means they're sort of in limbo for 2 months. And then we're going to have 0 to 8 weeks of a house hunt. And then before that, we're going to have maybe 2 tops from that initial contact to your pre-approval. It all sort of depends on scheduling and that kind of thing. So if you've watched my other video and you know that my credit's good enough, my debt to income ratio is good enough, and my employment history is good enough, and you reach out to me and you're ready to go, basically you're talking like kind of a maximum of 4.5 months, okay, from ready to go. And it can be faster than 2 months if you're ready to go. Maybe your lease ends in 3 months and you're like, man, can I pull this off? I really want to get this figured out. Yeah, you can pull it off, but you got to get moving on it. You got to start the process, get the process going. And lastly, as far as the timeline goes, I really do want to hammer home that if you're watching this and you know that your credit isn't good, maybe you have a good job, you've had it for a long time, but you know that your credit isn't good. Well, there are a lot of ways, and if you haven't yet, watch my video on Can I Get a Mortgage? And that video breaks down basically what you need to qualify for a mortgage. And I talk about it in that video, but I want to talk about it here as well because your preparedness, your financial situation greatly determines how long this is going to take. And the best way to improve that sort of financial situation is to have a chat with a lender. Basically, you want to find a lender who is good at credit restoration. Okay, that is going to be very important to you, especially if you have bad credit. If you have an 800 credit score, then you don't need that at all. If you're sitting down in the low 5s or the 4s or whatever, then you're going to need some credit restoration. And the best person to do that, specifically if your goal is to own a home, because they're going to know exactly what you have to fit into, everything that you have to do to get not only to the credit score, but the credit history, right, and the debt to income ratio to afford the house that you want to get. And that sort of clarity and direction is extremely valuable. So if you're interested in that, if you know that you're not in a good spot, trust me, I've been there, then reach out to me and I will get you in touch with somebody who can just absolutely crush it for you. And before you know it, we'll be driving around looking at houses. And before you know it, you'll own one. I hope you liked this video. If it gave you any value at all, please do me a favor and like it. Leave a comment. Everything that I do with this channel is about buying, selling, investing in real estate, specifically in Minnesota, and what it's like to live in Minnesota. So subscribe to this channel and hit the little bell to be notified. And you're gonna watch these videos, and before you know it, you're gonna be in a position where you can own your own house and you can quit paying your landlord's mortgage. That's what you're doing if you're paying rent. You're paying for their mortgage, you're helping them repair the house, and you might even be putting some money in their pocket every month, which I'm an investor. I know it's super valuable, but I think a huge step for most people is to own their own home first. And if you're interested in investing specifically, you're interested in growing your wealth, let's talk about a house hack. I am obsessed with it. Get a hold of me and let's talk about it and let's get you into something. Okay, thank you so much for watching this. Again, if you're interested, you gotta reach out to me. Phone call, text, email, submit a form on my website, Instagram DM, Facebook DM, whatever you gotta do. If you can find my address, you can mail me a letter or a postcard. Whatever you gotta do, just reach out to me and we'll get in touch and we'll get you just headed down the path. Even if it's 2 years out and you know that you wanna do it, get a hold of me. It won't be too soon. I'll be stoked to help you, and I assure you, I will crush it for you. And look at me. I look like this and I'm a real estate agent, okay? So I gotta be good at what I do. In fact, I gotta be the best, and so I am. A while ago, I heard somebody say that different is better than better. Well, I'm both. Cool. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.